The late 1880s and early 1890s had seen the revival of the armoured cruiser, and the brief dalliance of a number of major navies with the ideas of the Jeune École, which saw torpedo boats protected by fast cruisers as the battle fleet of the future, which required no battleships because, so the theory went, they were now too vulnerable. Under considerable financial pressure, the Kaiserliche und Königliche Kriegsmarine had adopted this latter thinking, constructing squadrons formed of torpedo boats, torpedo cruisers, and optimistically named torpedo ram cruisers. These larger types were actually protected cruisers, but as the decade turned from the 1880s to the 1890s, the rapidly spreading improvements in armour technology, at first nickel steel, which would later develop late in the decade into Harvey and then Krupp armour steels, meant that armour could now be fitted at reasonable thicknesses and give decent protection. This coincided with the development and improvement of quick-firing gun technology in the lower calibers, which in turn meant that a protected cruiser was no longer considered viable at any significant size. As in a large-scale fleet action, the number of shells that might be fired at such a ship would probably open up enough of the ship that, even if the protected deck did its job, the amount of flooding above it would likely either lead to the ship capsizing or slowing down to the point that torpedoes and heavy shells could finish it off. This all in turn led to a change in the design of what was to have been the third torpedo ram cruiser of the programme, enlarging the existing design slightly and, after some consideration, deciding to go with a fore and aft layout for the main guns. The amidships wing turrets of the previous era's ironclads now holding little appeal, since you didn't need a foot or two of armour concentrated amidships to make it even worth fitting. The resulting Kaiserin und Königin Maria Theresia was about mid-size, heading towards small for an armoured cruiser when you look at all the types it was contemporary with, but it wasn't too far off of average for the early 1890s. Laid down in July 1891 and launched in April 1893, commissioned in November 1894, she followed the scaled-up protected cruiser line of thinking, somewhat unsurprisingly, with a main battery of 2 single 9.4-inch guns, one fore and one aft, 8 single casement-mounted 6-inch guns, 4 to a side on 2 levels, a pair amidships per side level with the big guns, and 1 each end per side close to the 9.4-inch weapons but 1 deck below. Then 18 47mm guns in 2 different barrel lengths, which were scattered throughout the ship, along with 4 lightweight submerged torpedo tubes, 1 in each direction. 3.9 inches of belt armour and up to 2.2 inches of deck armour protected her vitals, with the turrets receiving the same level of protection as the main belt. Speed was a little on the slow side, just over 19 knots using 9,000 indicated horsepower on 2 screws, although this does have to be seen in light of the fact that most contemporary battleships could only make just over 16 knots. The 18 knots that we typically associate with pre-dreadnoughts wouldn't take hold en masse until a few years after this particular cruiser entered service. Designed to displace 5,100 tons normal, she actually completed just over 200 tons heavier, and so several refits would have to be done during her career, which largely focused on trying to reduce this weight, especially high up. These would, amongst other things, relocate some of the secondary battery, remove some of the tertiary battery, remove some of the superstructure, replace the masts with lighter models, and replace the main battery with a smaller pair of 7.6-inch guns, which could also fire faster, as well as weighing less, and thanks to 15 years of technological advancement, were actually better at punching through armour in most cases. She ended up having quite the active peacetime career, visiting foreign ports, taking part in combined interventions, and at one point almost getting stuck into the Spanish-American War when, on her way to Cuba to evacuate Austro-Hungarian citizens, she was mistaken for a Spanish battleship and almost ended up in a gunfight with the USS Indiana, amongst others. After a brief stop home, she was off overseas again, this time to take part in the suppression of the Boxer uprising in China, and would later patrol offshore during the immediate pre-World War I season of the Balkan Wars. But despite the outbreak of war, she was beginning to show her age, and to allow other, newer warships to operate at their greater speeds, she was first detached from the fleet and used instead as a guard ship, then a barrack ship, with her guns being removed for use on land, and in this condition she actually survived the war, then was ceded to the UK, who in turn sold her to an Italian shipyard for scrapping in the early 1920s.
That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have a comment or suggestion for a ship to review, let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to comment on the pinned post for dry dock questions.